Hi, everybody. Welcome. And on behalf of the National Child Passenger Safety Board, thank you for joining us today for the Community Education webinar, Leveraging Law Enforcement Partnerships to Enhance Child Passenger Safety Efforts. As I mentioned earlier, I am Tammy Franks, Secretary of the National Child Passenger Safety Board, and I will be serving as your MC today. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be posted to cps4.org recertification within 1 to 2 business days. For the child passenger safety technicians in attendance today, this presentation is a community education webinar and does not qualify for CEUs. Our first speakers will be sharing about the National Law Enforcement Liaison Program. Will Price is the NHTSA Program Manager for the National Law Enforcement Liaison Program. Will, a retired law enforcement officer, has been with NHTSA for 16 years and oversees the agency's contract with the Governor's Highway Safety Association to provide law enforcement liaison program support. Tim Burrows, also a retired law enforcement officer, has served as the law enforcement liaison manager for the Governor's Highway Safety Association for 3 years. He coordinates activity, communications, and technical support to the states for the law enforcement liaison programs. Please join me in welcoming Will and Tim.
Good morning, Tammy, and well, it's good morning here in Arizona. And good afternoon, and thank you to everybody who's joined us. We have Tim Burrows with us as well. We wanted to provide you with a little bit of an overview of the Law Enforcement Liaison Program and how it can be of support and assistance in CPS programs and in child passenger safety efforts in general. But I think it makes sense for us to talk a little bit first about what's happening within the law enforcement profession and the current state of affairs. It would be hard to find someone who is not aware of some of the issues that have occurred within law enforcement and the challenges that the profession is facing. Among those are issues related to declining numbers of law enforcement officers in the field. We know about some of the high profile incidents, but the expectations and demands on law enforcement are ever increasing. And so with that has come some reduction, we believe, in enforcement activity. And we know that enforcement is a critical component to creating that level of risk that drivers perceive that helps with modifying behavior and keeping the roads a little bit safer. And one of the things that we feel very strongly about is that the communication between our agency, GHSA, the state highway safety offices, is through the law enforcement liaison program. And these men and women provide a valuable service, and we're hoping that when we're finished here today, that you'll see that there's some things that we may be able to offer you, and we'd love to have you involved in some of what we're doing. Tim, would you take a few minutes to talk a little bit about the LEL program, what its purpose and what it's designed to do and how it can assist and support CPS activity?
Absolutely. First of all, thanks everybody for being online with this and for inviting me to take part. I love talking about the National Law Enforcement Liaison Program, not just because I represent it as the manager, but because of what it does. And essentially, to make it as simple as possible, we have over 200 law enforcement liaisons, the majority of which are retired law enforcement personnel or serving law enforcement personnel that stretch out across the country, working within their individual states for their state highway safety offices to do nothing but promote traffic safety, traffic efficiency, and traffic programs that are introduced by the state themselves or the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration. Sorry, Traffic Safety Administration. Too many acronyms, everybody, and it's too early in the week to have them all. anyways, the law enforcement liaisons provide a critical network across the country to share ideas, to talk about issues and events that they're seeing within their local jurisdictions, their regions, states, and then they share that nationally. My role as the National Law Enforcement Liaison Program Manager is to listen to those conversations that are going on and to share what I'm hearing from the states across the network. One of the most vital things we have is our communication tools and everything that we're able to do in terms of reaching out to not just our own law enforcement liaisons, but also our partners. And we recognize that our partners are some of the most vital partners that we can have in pursuit of traffic safety because we represent so many different facets. Child safety seats, one. Traffic incident management, move over laws, the partnerships with the national organizations, National Safety Council, the Governor's Highway Safety Association. All of these partnerships come together to allow us to share information with each other through several networks. We have the Law Enforcement Liaison Program website. We do a weekly traffic email blast called the Traffic Stop, and a monthly webinar series along with a quarterly newsletter. All of this information contains facts, stories, things that are happening from across the country to help inspire, share, show, and get the conversation going around traffic safety in general. But one of the highlights for me is always any opportunity I can talk about child passenger safety, simply because child passenger safety to almost every single law enforcement officer is a personal touch point. Many of us have children. Many of us have come from large families, and we recognize that children are the future and truly need to be protected. That's why many of our law enforcement liaisons actually are certified technicians, or at least connected well within the networks, that they'll be part of an organization committee to put on inspection clinics to help parents. Just stopping in at the local law enforcement agency, the police department, sheriff's office, to assist in that. So it's a vital network that I love being part of, and I want to make sure that everybody knows we're available to assist you in any way we can.
Thanks, Tim. You know, one of the things that we do, and Tim and I are going to kind of bounce off of each other as we go through our content, is one of the big issues for the law enforcement liaison program, and one of the things that we teach in our professional development courses is the idea of influencing action. It's the thing that needs to happen while we're encouraging law enforcement participation and engagement in traffic safety initiatives. And influencing action, it can be a real challenge. And Tim, you jump in any time. We have a couple of components here. One is to get people to look at something a little differently than they have before. And then the other component is to, once you've recognized that, maybe there's a better way of doing something, is to actually take action and affect a change. And, very often this does not require a lot of funding, but it may require changes in habits. And Tim, we've seen this over and over again.
Absolutely. One of the things that any industry and any organization will suffer from over time is doing things the same way over and over again, because that's the way it's always been done. With the Law Enforcement Liaison Program and our partnership with NHTSA, one of the things we strive to do is challenge that status quo of doing things just because. And we look for, why are we doing it? Is there something new? Is there a better way to do it? And how do we talk about it? And that goes across every facet of traffic safety, to make sure that we're not just sitting back and accepting stats or accepting data the way it is, but challenging those stats and challenging that data in ourselves to make sure we're doing everything we can. And that frontline law enforcement liaison can then take any information, changes, ideas, great aspects, and send it out to the law enforcement agencies that they work with and the partners that they share with. In the end, it makes for a stronger, more resilient traffic safety family.
Yeah. We talk about partnerships frequently and relationship building. And this is a great opportunity for the CPS community to get a sense or a little bit of an overview of what it is that we do within the LEL universe. And hopefully, and Tim will get to some other content downrange here about resources and how you can access and identify the LELs in your area. We really encourage you to reach out to those folks. And conversely, we communicate with the LEL network frequently about reaching out to all kinds of partners and developing those relationships. The CPS programs are a critical part of that, in addition to a lot of other folks that we interact with. Some of the things that we do here are we interact with a number of different organizations at the national level. So to be groups like GHSA and their membership, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, the National Sheriff's Association, and the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives as just a couple. And one of the big issues that has been identified, and something that we're all working very hard on, is to address the needs in communities that have typically been underserved, and in which we find that certain groups are perhaps overrepresented in terms of injuries, fatalities, and the seriousness of the outcomes of crashes that people are involved in. And one of the things that we did at NHTSA, it was a little more than a year ago, I was able to pitch and get support to do a CPS project through Noble to address the needs in an underserved community. And the area they're focusing on, I just thought I'd share with the group, is the area in Houston, Texas. Texas, unfortunately, experiences more traffic fatalities than any other state in the country. And Houston is particularly a particularly tough area because of the population size and the number of events that are happening there. So what we did is we put a program together with Noble to go out and work within a community at the grassroots level and to identify folks in neighborhoods or within community groups to train in the installation of child seats. And so we've been talking with folks down there about how to do that correctly and make sure that's done according to training curriculum. So we have well-trained folks out there doing this, but for this to happen at the community level. And then they'll organize an event and we'll take a look at how that works. And then for purposes of expanding or sharing that information, they'll produce a how-to guide that will be shared within the Noble organization that will share outside as well. But we feel very strongly that these underserved communities need a lot of attention. And this is one way of us trying to do this. And so we're not doing a huge effort. You know, the emphasis is aim small, miss small. But the benefit that we have is that we can do that course correction as we go along. And I met with Noble last week to find out where we are in terms of the project, and they're doing great work. And so we hope to have that wrapped up by May and to have something to share with all of you this summer in terms of that how-to guide and how to work within those communities. But the equity issues are very important. I know it's a big issue for GHSA and a number of other organizations. So we're putting a lot of effort into how to most effectively address some of those issues and to take care of people. Tim, I think this is probably a good time to fire up the PowerPoint and for you to talk a little bit about our content within the LEL community and show our audience where they can find all kinds of information about the LEL program.
Absolutely. Thanks, Bill. As you can see on the screen, hopefully you can see it, nlelp.org. That is the National Law Enforcement Liaison Program website. And this is the resource where not only our law enforcement liaisons and law enforcement agencies can come and see important information, but we also open this to the public. There's nothing that we hide. There's nothing that's not shared. It's all wide open for your own use, and use the resources that are available. On the top bar, you can see that we have several tabs: home, resources, training, best practices, and of course our calendar. The resources is a great opportunity to see what's going on in terms of receiving our information. So if you wanted to sign up for our mail list, which you'd receive the weekly traffic stop, notifications of our webinars, and our newsletters, you can simply click on the resources tab, drop down to the mail list, and you can sign up to receive those things. It's a personal opt-in, and anytime you want to opt out, you're more than welcome to do so. And we don't over inundate with you with a lot of information, but any information we do send out, I can guarantee it's pertinent to traffic safety professionals, and of course, the work that you're doing. One of the great questions that I saw in the chat was from Pam Ford. Pam asked about, is there a place where we can get the information on state law enforcement liaisons? And there absolutely is. On the right-hand side of the screen, it has the about the LELs. When you click on that tab, we'll come up with the LEL directory. And that is a state-by-state directory of all the law enforcement liaisons, and in the larger states, even broken down into regions. So if you're in a state with a lot of law enforcement liaisons, you'll be able to find the one that's actually closest to you that can help you the best. We also include state resources such as the TSRPs and the JOLs, and of course, the people at NHTSA that you can reach out to for the region. It's a great place to go and visit and find that information. We make those resources available, like I said, for anybody. We even have training opportunities that come up in the form of our webinars and our events that are open to the public, unless it's specifically said that it's not, in which you wouldn't see the information anyway. So like I said, everything on the website is yours for the taking. And we welcome you to come and check out the website, go through it, and certainly find out that directory of law enforcement liaisons that can help you with the work that you're doing. I guess we recorded a newsletter. The Law Enforcement Liaison Traffic Stop comes out every Friday. Monthly webinars, partner resources, data, and statistics are all available. We love being able to bring you this information and making sure that it's pertinent to anybody that's in the traffic safety and traffic safety partners fields that will be able to get this information. And we like to share that with you. So like I said, feel free to sign up. It's yours for the taking. If you need to get a hold of myself or Will, there's our contact information. Mr. Price, anything to add?
No, I thank you, Tim. You know, one of the things we always encourage LELs to do is to get out and meet other partners and to establish relationships and contact. We also encourage our partners to do the same thing with the LELs. So you have the list of, you at least can identify where they are and who the folks are in the area where you are. And we hope that you will reach out to them, establish some contact. They can be a great resource for you in terms of getting in front of law enforcement leaders and executives, and to establish communication and share information. It really is a good bunch of people. We have some very strong LELs out there around the country. We also have regional law enforcement liaisons who operate out of regional offices, the 10 regional offices that NHTSA has. So they're available to you as well if you have questions that sort of transcend the area that you're in. But we're all available to help you anytime. So if you have a question, reach out to Tim, reach out to me. We'll make sure we get you taken care of. And if we need to connect you with somebody, we're happy to do that. So Tim, thank you. And to our hosts, thank you very much for the opportunity to share a little bit about the LEL program and how we might be able to partner with our friends in the CPS community.
Great. Thank you so much, Tim and Will. We appreciate you sharing the program information. I believe that Justin Young is now able to join us, and so I will turn back over the emceeing to him. So, Justin, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, I had some technical difficulties. Very happy to be with you here. Thank you, Will and Tim, for explaining some of those sources that I know are going to be really helpful for some of the law enforcement, CPS techs, and instructors that we have on the call, and those who'll be checking out this webinar when it's recorded. So thank you very much for all that information and for being available when people have some questions in the future. So moving forward, wait a second. Trying to get myself back into this. There we go. So next up, our presenter for the second half of the webinar is Lonnie Haschel. Lonnie was a police officer from 1988 to 2021. During his 27 years with the Texas Department of Public Safety, he worked as a road trooper and spent the last 21 years of his career as the public information officer. Lonnie retired from the Texas DPS on August 31st, 2021, and is currently working for the National Safety Council as a program manager. Lonnie is also proud to be a child passenger safety technician instructor. Over the past 2 decades, he's been involved with child passenger safety in various aspects. He teaches the National Child Passenger Safety Technician Certification Training, the Safe Travel for All Children course, as well as the CPS Restraint Systems on School Buses course. Lonnie served on the National Child Passenger Safety Board from 2017 through 2021. While on the board, he served on multiple committees and served as the vice chairperson and chairperson. Please join me in welcoming Lonnie.
Oops, there we are. Technology is great, except when you need it. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to listen in and learn a little bit about working with the LEL program and then working with law enforcement in general. Hopefully you'll find this information insightful. We'll give you some things to those of you that are not law enforcement and looking to expand into that community. I'll give you some things to maybe approach the administration or maybe traffic safety units and such. So it is my privilege to be here. Thank you to the National Child Passenger Safety Board for the invitation. I greatly appreciate that. For those of you that have had to listen to me before, I'll apologize that I'm not better looking. But those of you that haven't, I will do my very best to leave you with some information here. So I'm going to share my screen and we will get started with child passenger safety and working with law enforcement. Now, a long time ago, I had an instructor tell me that whenever
Lonnie,
you're doing,
this is Tammy. I'm sorry. You may want to update your view. Currently, you're showing the presenter view.
well, let's see how we do that.
Unless you want everybody to see your notes, it's okay.
Hey, yeah. It's always exciting when you're working with technology. So let me fix this. Stop share. Share screen. There we go. Like I said, those of you that have had to listen to me present before, here we go. All right, how's that? More better?
Not quite. We're still seeing, now we're just seeing the slides like in progression.
Interesting. Let's try screen number 2. Stop share.
Sorry.
And my apologies, everybody, because I
Thank
have
you.
no idea what on earth is happening with this. It's not working like it's supposed to. So, share screen. Screen 2, share. All right, is that any better?
It was a second ago and then it went back.
Well, I don't know what was going on here. So you know what? I don't have any notes in there, so we'll just look at it, the slide folder view, and we'll go with that.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, so working with law enforcement, and as is evidenced by my issues here, this is your opportunity to be on a national stage, shine, and smell bad at the same time, just like a fish laying on the beach in the moonlight. So, which is what I've done with my lack of technology issues here. So anyway, prior to 2020, police community relations were, you know, they may not be the best out there in the world, but there wasn't the spotlight that there is on law enforcement in 2020. When 2020 rolled along, we had a whole another issue. We come in with COVID, the coronavirus. It changed all of our lives from this point moving forward. We've got restrictions on gatherings. We've got can't go in public areas. You have mask requirements. You have all these various things that you have to do. And then all of us, as you well know, had to stop your health and safety fairs. That all came to a screeching halt. And that was what law enforcement used, after having done that for many years in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. That's how we got out there in the public, boots on the ground, shaking hands, doing what you can, especially with child passenger safety. It was a meaningful way to make an impact on families and let those families see you in a little bit different light. It's not all the stereotypical things that they'd always heard back, like I said, prior to 2020. It was the donut jokes and all the things that would go around. And they would get to see that there's a personality behind that uniform, behind that badge. So we couldn't do that anymore. We had no more car seat events. We had no more inspection stations. The entire world pretty much just shut down. And that was a huge block to law enforcement and trying to push that image of being positive and here to help, as it was prior to 2020, that Norman Rockwell vision that we would all like to see. We have social distancing. We had to do, a lot of you are familiar with the NDCF, the National Digital Car Seat Check Form. Many of you may have transitioned to that, actually, during the COVID pandemic. I know I did. When I was doing child safety seat checks, a lot of the medical facilities had shut them down. Well, people didn't stop having babies. And so I was still able to continue to do that, but masked up, gloved up, hand sanitizer everywhere. And we used the NDCF to help with that. So we could still keep our forms, track our data, and maintain a good social distance. But we had to disinfect everything, mask wearing all the time. And we're still in that, just to a different level. So now we had COVID-19, and then you may recall we had the Delta variant, and now we have the Omicron variant. And do you ever feel like this? You know, who knows what's next? I mean, there's a whole Greek alphabet we've got to go through, but we're hoping we never do. But it's like the old Charlie Brown Linus thing. It's going to hold the football for you and pull it away again every time. And as many of you are seeing, the Omicron variant across the country is rearing its ugly head. So where do we go? How do you get law enforcement into the picture whenever you've got all these things going on? So in 2022, as Will had mentioned, there's some issues that we've got to examine, some changes that have happened. There's probably reductions in availability for law enforcement. Some of the police departments across the country have had to cut back on their SROs, for example, that's school resource officers. I know of some police departments across the country that have completely pulled officers out of the school, which that was another great avenue for law enforcement to let young people or across the country see what the cops were all about. And some really good relationships that were built there. But due to budgets and sickness, illness, and promotions, as you see on the screen there, retirements, myself included, resignations, training mandates. Now think of the profession that you are in and the number of mandated training requirements that you have at your entity, whatever that is. Now add in there a legislatively mandated requirement for you. So as in my former profession, we had 80 hours of training that were required twice a year, plus that was federally legislatively mandated, plus on top of the training mandated by the department itself. So those are huge restrictions. And then the last one, we're not immune. Every traffic stop that an officer makes, every call that they go to, call for assistance they go to, they run that risk of contracting this, now the Omicron variant. And it's taken its toll, it's sick leave and such. So keep all those things in mind as you are working with your programs, trying to build them up. That they'll be able to listen, but they may not be able to jump in with both feet like they could prior to the world of COVID. Despite those hurdles, though, police-community relations are always a priority. They're always important because law enforcement can't do its job without the support of the public. All officers are constantly trying to build relationships, building trust, and want to work together. That's why whenever you're out, if you go by, those of you in Texas, there's a place called Whataburger. Those on the West Coast, it's probably In-N-Out Burger and such. But if you're sitting in there and you see a couple of officers dining, you go up and talk to them. They'll be in the middle of their meal and they will still stop and answer your questions. That happened to me. I can't tell you how many times over my 30 plus years, but they don't mind. They really are out there working for you, risking life and limb to make their community a safer place. And it is all about working together. Those relationships, child passenger safety, like I said, is one of the best avenues that I ever experienced to engage the public, promote that public safety, and build those bridges. You are engaging the community once you get past the uniform, because in the area of some of the folks I used to work with are actually on the webinar, and they can attest to this. But if I'm there in uniform, we really had to overcome the hurdle of having people just drive by because they saw the uniform and they were intimidated. So I worked very hard with my other law enforcement partners to overcome those barriers and let our personality show. Love to have fun, especially with the kids. And breaking that barrier with the children is the first step. Then once the barrier was broken with the kids, then the parents would then come in, and then by then life was good. And we're able to push that public safety message. Once they realized that we weren't necessarily there in an enforcement capacity, we were there as an educational opportunity for them. Again, remember, as a car seat, child safety seat technician, we want to educate rather than install. So in that case, once that barrier was broken, then we opened the avenue, had a little fun, and then moved on with safety to make sure that the caregiver and their family member all were safe. But we've got to overcome those hurdles that have been instilled in these people as we're moving through the communities and moving through time with outlook on law enforcement. So you may ask yourself, all right, I'd like to partner with the sheriff's department, with the local police department. Who do I talk to? Sometimes absolutely reach out to the administration, your chiefs, sheriffs, constables, and such. Absolutely reach out to them. But you also might reach out to a traffic division. If your agency is large enough to have a specialized group of divisions, you may have resource officers, you may have a traffic division, you may have a community-oriented policing division, whatever it is. If you have that ability, reach out to that individual, that contact person, call your local police department and say, hey, do I have a law enforcement police liaison for my specific community if you're in an urban area? If you're in a rural area across the country, reach out to that local sheriff. They may have some of their deputies who focus solely on traffic. If not, the community where I live right now, and have retired too, has 7 deputies and 1 sheriff. So that is not near anything like in the urban area where I came from. So you would have to reach out to that local sheriff and state your case, tell them what you would like to do. Once you've got the support of that traffic division supervisor or that sheriff or that police chief, and then you run into the issue, who do you get to become technicians? And those of you in the audience, some of you out there right now, I'm sure were voluntold to go to the car seat class. That's what they call it in layman's terms for the officers. Others volunteered. Volunteers are great. We love those, whether they're community volunteers or volunteers in law enforcement to go to these child safety certification trainings. Positive attitude, eager to learn, patient, passionate. They want to be there. On the other hand, we have those that maybe didn't know this is what they wanted to do. That was me. Some in the year 2000. That was part of my job requirement. I moved into the public relations part of where I worked. And it was a job requirement that you had to become a certified child passenger safety technician. Now, at the time, I was very young, did not have any kids, and I thought, why on earth do I need to go to a 40-hour course to learn how to do something that I can use duct tape and attach? I was voluntold, and during that class, and I credit my instructor team for this, they instilled in me, I don't know, they planted the seed, I guess is the way to put it, and really motivated me to move forward. So keep that in mind. If you are technician instructors out there and you're working with law enforcement, that might be the avenues to get those folks in the class and work. Because voluntold can always be awesome as well. It's not always a negative. Many great child passenger safety technicians were voluntold. They didn't know that the passion was there. It was just up with that, or up to that child passenger safety technician, instructor, mentor, or to mentor them and work with that law enforcement officer. Just be positive, inspire, motivate, just like you do with the others. But there are some special things that you may have to keep in mind for law enforcement, and we'll get into those here in just a moment. We're working with cops. If there are law enforcement officers out there, we had a unique sense of humor. So we have to make sure we keep it family friendly, because think of the things your law enforcement officer out there, along with fire service, they're sometimes going to run across people when they are having their absolute worst day. And to help combat that, just for mental health, the police community and the fire community, and oftentimes EMS and medical, have a very strange sense of humor. Their conversations at the dinner table with their family members is a little bit different than your average family. So just keep that in mind. If the officers may say something, it's not intentional. It's just the way that their brains work, because they often see that person on their worst possible day and they're just dealing with it. So you got to overcome those issues, and then you got to overcome some outside factors. So they're in your class, they're learning how to become a car seat technician. There's pressure there to pass. I will speak to this and attest to this personally. I was a state trooper, and the folks that were in my office or area of responsibility, they were making fun of me because I was going to a baby seat class. And then the supervisor gets in there and they add a little extra pressure. You better not fail this. So you're trying to overcome that peer pressure. You're trying to overcome that pressure to pass from the supervisor. And at the same time, you're working in a class that's not law enforcement per se. It's with other people that are outside that in the civilian world. So there's some hidden pressure there that not everybody may be aware of. Law enforcement officers do have test anxiety. I mentioned those legislatively mandated classes. Those are a lot different than what the child passenger safety technician certification training quizzes are. You think about the CPS tech quizzes, they're a culmination of the modules as you move through them. Law enforcement tests and quizzes are specific. There is no gray area. It is either this or it is that. It is A, it is B, it is C. So it's important for, if you are in that area where you can talk to the officers, explain in advance, and I do this when I teach. Hey, if you're an officer, law enforcement person in the room, this is not your standard legal test that would be required by your state legislature. It's a little bit different. So take some extra time and explain that to the officers, and they will be grateful to you for that, because they have to switch the way that they've been thinking, the way that they've been trained. Plan events with those law enforcement folks. Maybe build a local coalition. So if you're in that very rural area, maybe you visit with 2 or 3 or 4 different sheriff's departments. Go out 4 counties wide, and don't forget about who may be in there. Work with whatever communities you have. Doesn't make any difference what your participants are, but it does towards that end goal of making children safe. So maybe you can build a coalition if you're in a rural area, like I said, of several departments. Even if you're in an urban area, you can do the same thing. I was privileged to work with a part of one of those in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Whenever you talk to that administrator about getting some child passenger safety technicians on board from their department, they're going to want immediate results. That's what they're used to. They send an officer to training for a crash reconstruction school. Well, then as soon as they're done on Friday, on Monday morning, they expect them to go out and work crashes and know how to do all the math and do flip vault theories and all that. So keep in mind, when you're working with that administrator, tell them up front, this is not something that they can just come home on, after the class is over on a Friday and then have their very first car seat check event on Saturday. So it's important for people that are wanting to work with law enforcement to explain that up front to law enforcement administration, because they are very results oriented. I can't tell you how many times I got called in the office by my supervisors wanting to know how many people did not, or how did they word this? We know how many car seats inspected, but how many people did not were not involved in car crashes because of the education you provided? Well, how do you grab that number? That was always for 30 years, that was the issue. How do I tell people that? So it's very important to have that administration on board as well as that car seat technician. Next, and this is the tough question for programs across the country. How do we retain our car seat technicians? You may have noticed in your area with COVID, you probably had some technicians that didn't recertify. Many may have been law enforcement or firefighters or in the medical profession just because of COVID. But we've got to overcome three things: transfers, promotions, and retirements. So it's going to be a constant flow. So don't get frustrated if you get in there and you have one person that you just trained and you don't see him again that next research cycle. Keep the faith, as they say. Keep in with that in with the department, whether it be the sheriff, the city police chief, the constable, whatever you've got, and have a constant flow of car seat technicians coming through there, because things are going to happen. People are going to be transferred. They're going to get promoted. When you promote from a patrol or a trooper position into a managerial position, oftentimes you don't have time to continue to keep the child passenger safety technician certification up. So what we want to do is make sure that you've got that constant communication and that line open of communication with those administrators so that you'll have new folks coming on. And then retirements and resignations as people move on. So it's just a fact of life. It's no different than any other profession that you folks are in. All right, last, if there are any questions, I'll hit the stop share button. Maybe I can do that right for a change. Any questions out there? Let's see what we've got here. All right, got one on here. Says, I've had other law enforcement officers surrounding counties lament the difficulty in getting seat checks signed off versus taking the recertification class. I completely understand. I was in the Dallas-Fort Worth area of Texas. For those of you not from the state of Texas, just a little geography. It's quicker to drive from El Paso, Texas to Los Angeles than it is to drive from El Paso to Texarkana, Texas. So I completely understand that. There were places that were 2.5 to 3 hours away that I was their closest instructor. So I had to use technology. Some of you may have done car seat checks with FaceTime and other technological advances that uses video. And sometimes that may be an option for you, is to have the instructor online with that tech so that they can run through and make sure that they're following the curriculum guidelines and that they're providing education to those families to get those folks signed off. Because it is important to keep that certification. After all, if you're a car seat technician, you worked very hard to get that, and you don't want to let that go. So, any other questions out there, Tammy? Anything I'm missing, Justin?
So there is a follow-up for you about how we can build more comfort at an event with law enforcement officers that are in uniform. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do. I was restricted. The department I worked for, we were not allowed to wear anything but the full uniform. So what you saw in that last picture there, that's what I had to wear at every event. And that was a real treat, being in the back seat of a car, showing a caregiver how to put a car seat in when it's 110 degrees and the kids are pulling all the stuff on your belt. So if at all possible, if the administrators, chiefs, constables, sheriffs, whomever will allow it, sometimes they have an alternate uniform. Some of the departments that I worked with allowed their officers to wear a polo shirt with the insignia on it, and then a different type of, maybe even shorts. Some of them wore shorts, some of them wore a EMS style pant. But absolutely, an alternative uniform sometimes gets rid of that stigma. But at the same time, you want that uniform out there so that they know who you can go to. It always frustrated me. I'd be sitting somewhere or in a restaurant or in a mall or just at some event, and people would walk by, they would point at me and tell their little kiddo you better be good or he's going to take you to jail. Now, what did that parent just tell that child? Don't look at that person as somebody that can help them in a time of need. Stay away from that person because they're going to take you to jail. So that was always very frustrating to me. But absolutely, that's to one end and to one option rather, is to maybe ask if there's an alternative uniform. A lot of departments have that nowadays, and just unfortunately where I work, it was not an option. So I hope that helped.
Yeah, and I'd also put in, even if an officer is in full uniform, I think your facial expressions, are you happy to be there? Are you happy to see when somebody shows up? You know, you've got a big smile on your face because you're grateful for this opportunity, or, you know, do you have that frown? Or are you, you know, officer stern? So I think that can do a lot to either help, you know, start making somebody feel more comfortable in approaching and being willing to listen, or whether they've already put up some of their walls and they're not really looking to engage with you. We had another question from Pam for Tammy, talking about if it's an option for sign-offs, especially in this time. Tammy?
Okay, one more time, Justin, sorry.
So Pam put in a question for you, asking if it's an option for sign-offs, especially in this time. I'm wondering if she's referring to how, virtual observations. She added in a little bit more for us.
Yes, and is there anybody on from certification right now? I prefer to defer to them. Don't know, I didn't see anybody in the attendees. So Pam, I'll follow up with you via email with some guidelines. If I can find them quickly, I'll post them here, but we'll get that information to you. So virtual seat checks are an option, or virtual observations are an option per Safe Kids.
And temporarily, we're still under the ability for technicians and instructors to take additional CEUs in order to take the place of those in-person seat checks. So if you have somebody who doesn't have an instructor nearby to be able to do those sign-offs, that could still be a good option for them at this point. All right, so thank you for the questions we've had so far. Certainly, if you have more questions, that's the point we're at. This webinar recording is going to be posted cpsboard.org/recertification under the Community Education Webinars tab. But we want those questions to keep coming through so we can answer as many as possible. All right, so Aubrey says, I work for our state highway safety office, and I've had our LEL help check in with technicians and their agencies. It's been incredibly helpful when I can't get a hold of individuals. So if anyone else knows who their LEL is, can they get in contact with them to create a relationship? Just wanted to mention that we've found it very helpful in our state. There's a nice plug for the LELs. And there was a question earlier, reference LELs, I believe. So Denise had a question. Tim or Will, if you guys could jump in on this one. On the LEL topic, I'm seeing that you can subscribe to the weekly e-newsletter, but is there also a way to automatically receive the LEL, the quarterly newsletter? I haven't been able to find that option on the website, so I'd appreciate a hint if that's possible. Thanks.
Well, it's like magic. You sign up for the one, you've signed up for both. So that's it. That's the easy. And as far as reaching out to LELs to find out if they can be assistants through the state highway safety offices, almost all of them can do that function. There are some state highway safety offices that limit what the LELs can do. So make sure you do get in contact with that LEL first to find out. And like I said, on the directory, they'll be more than happy to help you just with a phone call or an email.
Great. Thank you for that info. Lonnie, another one from Denise says, do you think that there's value in working to urge retiring or resigning officers to maintain their presence in CPS activities? That is, might direct encouragement help them to decide to stay involved? I would think that retired LE CPSTs would be a very valuable part of the community.
Absolutely. It was mentioned in my introduction, I just retired in August, and I have the privilege to work with the folks. I'm in Indiana, and there's another great team of techs and instructors here, and I still want to stay active because, like is mentioned there, you don't want to lose that that tenure, that expertise, if you would. If you've got somebody that's been doing that for a while, if you can encourage those retirees to stay with that, it can be a great resource for your younger folks that you're trying to mentor, because they've been there, done that, they've worn the uniform, they know the attitudes, they know what it's like, and they can maybe help mentor those younger folks who are just getting started and help them navigate some of the pitfalls that they run across in law enforcement as they're moving forward the person technician career.
So Denise is asking a question for Will and Tim. How does someone become an LEL?
That's a great question. It's done generally through the State Highway Safety Office. In a couple of states, we do have a third-party contractor. Whenever those jobs do become available, they're generally posted online. But if you have a contact at your State Highway Safety Office, or you really would like to do that function, drop the State Highway Safety Office a line and get your name, get known in there, and do some work with the CPS. What a great way to volunteer to get your face known around the people that matter for that kind of decision.
Denise has a follow-up to that one. How do partners get assigned?
In terms of Lonnie or Justin, sorry.
So her first question there, how does someone become an LEL? And then
Okay.
she piggybacked on that and asked how partners get assigned, LEL partners.
Generally speaking, if it's from the national perspective, an email to myself or to GHSA showing what you would bring a value to the table in terms of a partnership is a great way. For the states, it would be the exact same thing through the State Highway Safety Office or the LEL network, to let them know that you want to partner with them, and here's what you have to offer that is a great benefactor to both sides of the relationship.
Very good. Tracy's asking, has anyone ever asked about a pin created and being added to an agency uniform? A while back, they had state troopers who mentioned it would be a nice incentive, but it proved too difficult to get approved, so it was dropped. Have any organizations who are a part of this call tried it? I can say at my agency, we just have a simple, it's just in letters, so CPST. We don't have anything fancy. It's just you could go to any of your uniform pin suppliers, and they can put together a combination of letters and numbers that you wanted. It'll cost a certain amount of money, but that's what we do at our agency. I don't know about DPS or anywhere else.
Justin, the state of Texas, we didn't have anything there for the Texas Department of Public Safety. That was not an option, as was mentioned in the comment. It's a bit of a challenge to get things approved because they're very strict on what can go on the uniform.
Yep.
But not that I'm aware of in my former employ.
Mark mentions that Connecticut's got instructor and technician pins, so they're leading the way. And Tammy just put the link in to the chat for anybody who's looking for those C-check alternatives. Got a link there so that you can read all about that.
So Justin, this is Tammy, we've had some suggestions about the like a pin to signify. Does anybody, if you have any ideas of what would be a good, I don't know, icon, symbol, something to use, feel free to enter that in the chat box as well. I do know that is a topic that is in a review in one of the committees on the board right now.
That's exciting news. Well, certainly if there are any final questions, please put them in the chat. But in the meantime, I will point out what's on the screen there for you. We've got some other great webinars that are coming up in February. We've got putting CPS in emergency vehicles, and then growing your own, let me move the chat so I can read it all. Grow your own CPS social media presence is coming up in March. And we'll continue to try to put on great webinars for the CPS community. There's more after March. Just keep coming back to cpsboard.org/webinars, and you'll see what we have and what's coming up. So we encourage you to register and join us for those. And we certainly thank everybody who came and joined us today, and hope you have a wonderful, how do we sign up for the social media webinar? That question just came in. So if you go to that link down there at the bottom, cpsboard.org/webinars, you should be able to see the whole list of them. There should be a nice hyperlink to be able to register for that or any of the others. Pam is asking, is there any national requirement standard for police badges, pins, etc.? I understand each agency will have their own requirements, but yeah, to my knowledge, it's every agency gets to make its own determination on that. Panelists, do you know differently?
No, this is long. I think it's up to the individual entity. There may be some state requirements in law that say you can't have it look like a certain thing. They don't want, like in Texas where I was, they didn't want the state uniform. It was almost trademarked so that a department couldn't copy the badge. But other than that.
Well, once again, I thank our presenters, Will, Tim, and Lonnie. Thank you very much for the information you provided in this great webinar. Thank you to all of our attendees, and we look forward to having you at our next one.
Thanks so much for having me included. I really appreciate it, and good luck and have a great day.